Hello everyone, my name is John and this video is going to be about my journey from New York City to Kaohsiung. So first of all, what's New York City? What and where is New York City? New York City is basically made up of five boroughs. We call them boroughs and there are five of them. There's the Bronx here in red, Manhattan, the one that everyone knows about, and the one that people think of when they think of New York City. That's the one in green. Queens, the orange one, Brooklyn, yellow, and Staten Island, the purple. So the first borough I'm going to talk about is the Bronx. The Bronx got its name from a man named Jonas Bronk. In 1639, he was from the Netherlands. And yes, that's because the first people to come to New York City were from the Netherlands, not from England. So it used to be called New Amsterdam and not New York because it was owned, or it was a colony basically, of the Netherlands. Okay, and originally New York City it looked like this. This is a map of actually New Amsterdam. You see it kind of ends in this line, and that's called Wall Street. And that's how it's got its name, Wall Street, because it used to be a wall. Now, this is a picture of a side by side of what New Amsterdam used to look like 300 years ago and what that same area in New York City looks like today. Today, it looks like this. This is a better picture of how it looks like. And this is not all of New York City. This is just downtown. This is just the Wall Street financial area. Now, how did the English get New Amsterdam and ultimately call it New York? Well, they got it without even fighting. There was no war at all. The Dutch surrendered New Amsterdam to the British without a fight. Why did they do that? Well, at the time, they thought that a country that they also occupied, called Suriname, was worth more than New Amsterdam. So they said, whatever, take New Amsterdam. We don't need it. It's not worth much. We have another country in South America that we think is going to be worth a lot more. Well, turns out they were totally wrong. Today, New York's economy is worth $1.75 trillion. Suriname, only 3.7 billion. To put that in perspective, Suriname's economy is 473 times smaller than New York's. Taiwan's economy is 620 billion, also smaller than New York City's economy. So, the new owners of New Amsterdam, and they call it New York after a city in England called York. Now, you might recognize this photo, and that photo is also seen in a movie called Harry Potter. All right, it's that famous street where Harry buys his magic wand. All right, that's in the city of York in England, but they named New York after that old city. All right, back to our boroughs. So we have the five boroughs, and we're talking about the Bronx right now. What's the Bronx famous for? What's in the Bronx? Yankee Stadium. Yankee Stadium is located in the Bronx. I don't really know what else there is to do in the Bronx. Most people go there to see and watch the Yankees game. All right, now Manhattan. We got the Bronx out of the way. Let's talk about Manhattan because Manhattan, love it or not, it is the most important part of New York City. It is what we think of when we think of New York City. All right. So, what makes Manhattan really special and unique is that it's arranged in a grid like pattern, right? So, all the streets have numbers, whether you're going from north to south, east to west, it's all numbered, very easy to follow. And it wasn't always like this. All right, it used to actually look like this. Manhattan had many mountains and hills. This is a picture of what Manhattan looked like before they created that grid to make it look like it is today. There were a lot of hills. It was very bumpy. It wasn't easy to walk around. You kept going up and down. And so it actually got its name from the two tribes that lived there, the Lenape and Munsee tribes of the Native Americans. They called it Mannahatta, which means island of many hills. That's how we get the name Manhattan. So back to our plan. In the 1800s, 1811, they created a grid plan to knock down all those hills, level it, and create the Manhattan that we know today. But they left a single part of Manhattan untouched, and that is Central Park. Central Park was not touched by that plan. So if you go into Central Park, you're going to see what Manhattan used to look like before they leveled it and made everything flat. All right, so you got nice greenery, you got hills inside, you have lakes inside. But when they built Central Park, there were only one kind of people that would visit it, the wealthy class. And that's because they were the only ones who had the time to go to the park during the day. The working class, blue collar, poor people, they didn't have time to enjoy the park. They were working all day. So if you see a lot of pictures, photos, paintings of the park in the 1800s, you're going to see mostly very wealthy people walking around there because they were the only ones who had time to stroll around in the park during the day. Another famous, of course, area of Manhattan many people know about is Times Square. Times Square is known for its colorful lights, vibrant electricity that it gives off. We have, yes, the Empire State Building over there, which you may know from movies like King Kong. And in 1945, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but an airplane accidentally crashed into the Empire State Building, but the Empire State Building didn't fall down like the unfortunate tragedy of 9/11. And yes, I saw 9/11 happen. I was in school. I watched it from the roof of my school, and it was a day that I will never forget. Today, this is what the area looks like. We call it the Freedom Tower or One World Trade Center. This is the new building that replaces the World Trade Center. What else do we have in Manhattan? Well, we have the Madison Square Garden, which is home of the New York Knicks. We got the famous Chinatown, and we have Little Italy. Little Italy is just like Chinatown, except it's very Italian instead of very Chinese. And we have another little street that many people don't know about, and it's called Koreatown or K Town, otherwise known as the soul of New York. And it's one small street with Korean restaurant, club, supermarket after the other, packed into this tiny little street in Manhattan. Of course, can't forget Broadway, and we have something called the High Line. The High Line used to be a train track, an above ground train track, and they turned it into a park. And you can basically walk for many blocks in New York City. Actually, you can walk from like half of New York City to the bottom half above ground. So you don't have to worry about crossing streets. You don't have to worry about traffic. You can just continue your walk all the way through nonstop above the streets of Manhattan. We have a new building, a new structure called the Honeycomb, which is pretty cool. You can check it out if you ever go there. Recently, they just opened up something called a floating park, which is pretty cool. Let's not forget Grand Central. Grand Central, many movies have Grand Central featured in it. It's a big station, it's beautiful. Um, Rockefeller Center. Rockefeller Center is another great part of New York City. And it just reminds me that one of the best places to celebrate Christmas in the world is actually New York City. It's a beautiful place during New York City during Christmas. Lots of lights, lots of festivities, beautiful Christmas tree. You can go ice skating in the park. It's really nice. Another part of New York City is the film industry. Almost every time you go walking in the streets of New York City, you're most likely going to walk into a film set because they're everywhere and they happen all the time. That's because the film industry is a huge part of New York's economy. It's everywhere. They provide all the services, all the catering, and the equipment that film in Hollywood needs to do their movies. And that's why you see a lot of movies occur in New York City. It's not just because they love New York City and they like to show New York City in their movies is because it's really easy and cheap for them to do. New York City offers a lot of incentives. They offer a lot of things to Hollywood. Hey, come, make your movie here. It'll be really cheap for you if you do it. We have this, this, and that ready for you. Come do it. And that's why a lot of movies occur in New York City, not just because it's a nice place to look at when you're watching a movie, but because it's really convenient and cheap for Hollywood to make their movies there. And there are a lot of jobs there. So it's a big industry, it's a big job market to have. And of course, yes, I myself saw a lot of celebrities living in New York. I think almost every New Yorker, everyone who lives in New York, you'll walk into celebrities like the cast of Gossip Girl, Robert De Niro, Natalie Portman, Steve Buscemi, who's actually a really cool guy, ran into him many times, and Jennifer Lopez. And of course, let's not forget, I did see before, walked into him, saw him, Donald Trump. All right, where were we? So, I talked about the Bronx, talked about Manhattan. Now we're going to talk about Brooklyn. Brooklyn got its name from a village in the Netherlands as well. So, Brooklyn is very famous. Everybody knows Brooklyn. It's got its name from a village in the Netherlands. Nobody really knows about that village in the Netherlands. I think the real Brooklyn became way more popular. And of course, Brooklyn is known for the Brooklyn Nets. And Captain America was born in Brooklyn in the comics, not the actor. So if you read the comics, Captain America is actually from Brooklyn. Another famous part of Brooklyn is its pizza. Its pizza is awesome. Beautiful view from Brooklyn is this view right here. It's this picture is actually in a place called Dumbo. Yeah, like the elephant Dumbo. But Dumbo stands for Down Under Manhattan Bridge Overpass. I know that's a mouthful. Basically, you're looking here at the Manhattan Bridge. So, how do we know the difference between the Manhattan Bridge, which you see in this picture on the top, and the Brooklyn Bridge, which is the one on the bottom? I'm sure a lot of people here have heard of the Brooklyn Bridge, maybe not so much the Manhattan Bridge. What's the difference, right? How do we know the difference? Well, the Brooklyn Bridge, simple, it's made of bricks. B, bricks, Brooklyn. The Manhattan Bridge is made of metal. M, metal, Manhattan. All right. And that's Brooklyn, basically. Now, next borough, borough of Staten Island. They call this borough the Forgotten Borough. If you look at this map, you can kind of see why. It's not really connected as closely to the other boroughs of New York City. It's a little farther away. And that's kind of why sometimes people forget, oh, yeah, Staten Island is also part of New York. Some years ago, Staten Island actually wanted to secede from New York City. That means to leave New York City and be part of somewhere else, like New York State or New Jersey, which is the state next to New York. But that never happened. They're still part of New York City, and it's a beautiful, beautiful borough. You can actually go from the tip end of Manhattan, Wall Street area, to Staten Island by the Staten Island Ferry, which is known for its famous color. It's the only ferry in New York City that has that orange color, and it's free. That's the best part of it. You can hop on that boat and you can get on it for free, and you'll be passing by the Statue of Liberty. So it's a nice way to see the Statue of Liberty from a boat for free. What an added benefit, right? Staten Island will soon hopefully be home to another giant Ferris wheel, just like the London's Eye and maybe the one you have here in Ida. They're planning on building it soon, hopefully. The project has gained a lot of hiccups, but it's moving along. And finally, our last borough of New York City. Talked about the Bronx, talked about Manhattan, we talked about Brooklyn, and we talked about Staten Island. Now I'm going to talk about Queens. Queens. Why did I save Queens for last? Well, Queens is known for its World's Fair, which I'm sure you've seen in movies like Men in Black, Iron Man, and yes, there is another Marvel comic superhero who comes from Queens, and his name is Spider Man. Spider Man is from Queens.
Queens is also famous for the baseball team, the New York Mets, and it's where I am originally from. I grew up in Queens, in a little house in Queens. I went to high school in Queens. I went to college, university in Queens. I even had my first job serving ice cream in Queens. Queens is a melting pot of cultures. It's one of the boroughs that has almost every single country represented in the world. Most of New York City is actually big melting pot of many cultures. There are over 1,000 cultural organizations in New York City, and 40% of the New York City population was actually born outside of the United States of America. If you call the government services at 311, you can speak to anyone in almost any language in the world. They have services to every kind of person. You can even pass a driving test in any language you like. And because of that, we have things from all over the world, like different foods. It's great. But the downside of it is that having so many people from all over the world can sometimes mean that people don't really get along as well. But at the same time, you have a lot of people who understand each other. And you'll see often people fighting, and that's because people sometimes don't understand where others are coming from. You also see a lot of crazy people too in New York City. We got them all. We got all kinds of crazy people. And if you want to see a lot of what goes on in New York City on a daily basis, check out the Facebook page, What is New York, to see more crazy stuff. Back to the different cultures. So, New York and much of the United States of America had gone through immigration waves. All right. That means that in the beginning, most of the people coming to America and to New York were from Ireland, Germany, and the UK. Then a lot of people were coming in from Italy, Russia, and Hungary. After that, there was a huge influx of people from Canada, Mexico, and Cuba running away from communist countries. And then you had a lot of people coming from Asia, like the Philippines and China. So let's look at this little graph, little GIF over here to see how the migration went over the years. All right. So in the 1800s, you have a lot of people coming in from Europe. You got more than 1 million people coming in from Ireland, Germany, the UK, and they keep coming in from 1800 all the way to the late 1800s, to almost 1900. See all those people coming in. They're coming in from other countries, but mostly Germany, UK, and Ireland. Then things starts to change. Italy becomes a really big player in the immigration game. A lot of people coming from Italy, a lot of people coming from Russia and Hungary and other parts of Eastern Europe in the early 1900s. Now we're getting around to between the First World War and the Second World War, and we're starting to see more people come from Germany again, people coming in from Canada, Italy, which had a fascist regime. And then after the war, you see more people coming in from Germany, from Canada, and more people are coming from Mexico. And you see a lot of people coming from Mexico. Like that's why the second largest language speaking population in New York City is Spanish. And then the 80s, you get, a lot of people from other parts of Asia. And especially in the 90s, you get a lot of people from China, from Taiwan, from Vietnam, from all parts of Asia. Asia and Mexico become the major player in the immigration game for New York City. So, how did I end up in Taiwan? Well, because of China. That's how I ended up in Taiwan. How? Back to where I used to grow up. I was a little kid, I lived in Queens, and I had a neighbor who just moved in from China. And we became really good friends. He and I were like 8, 9 years old. We played every day, and he invited me to his house. And almost every single day, he invited me to eat dumplings. It was the first time I had dumplings. I liked it. The smell was very unique for me. The house, what I remember, was full of Chinese porcelain and blue everywhere in the house. And I eventually really loved Chinese food. Now, Chinese food in New York City is not like Chinese food in Taiwan. It's very different. It tastes different. It's more salty. It's more greasy. There's some MSG in it. We actually call it dirty Chinese food. That's what we nickname it. But I also paid attention in school to social studies, civic studies. I liked it. I learned a lot about it. And I knew before that Taiwan is not China. So when I was in college, and almost every college in America has something called a TSA, which is a Taiwan Student Association. They do a lot of events, they create kind of artificial night markets, they have a lot of fairs, they invite everybody to come. And so we had in my college a Taiwanese student association where I would always hang out because they had the nicest building in the college and they had a really good facility over there. So I used to hang out there and I made a lot of friends who were from Taiwan. And one of them said to me, "Hey, you should come and check out Taiwan. During the summer vacation, come and check out Taiwan." Now, during the summer, I like to work. So I wasn't so keen on going to another country, spending a lot of money, and not working. I had to do something meaningful during my summer break, something that I can be proud of later on, something that I can use later on for work or for another school that I wanted to go to. So I went on a website called Craigslist. At that time, Craigslist is where you could find anything, something for sale or a job. And I found a job in Taiwan on this website. And the job was in the city of Taichung, and it was working for the YMCA. So I went to the YMCA, and everybody thought I went to Thailand. All my friends, they thought I was in Thailand. And I had to explain to them that no, I'm not in Thailand, I'm in Taiwan. Sorry, guys. I used this to tell them the difference. I said, you know that bubble tea we have in New York City with all those balls in it? Yeah, that's Taiwan. And you know that other thing, that tea with the milk in it? That's Thailand. Oh, okay, that's the difference. Got it. So I fell in love with Taiwan. Taiwan was like, it was the best experience of my life. It was the best summer of my life at the time. Taiwan is like an adult playground. As an adult, you can almost do whatever you want. In New York City, you can't always do whatever you want, especially outside. And so it was really great. It was a lot of fun. But I miss New York and I wanted to go back to New York because at the end of the day, I love New York. So I went back to New York. But I came back the next summer to work at Academia Sinica in Taipei. So I had to go back to New York, but I knew that I'm going to come back to Taiwan for next summer to do something else. So I went to Academia Sinica, and as you know, Academia Sinica is in Taipei, and I hated Taipei. I hated Taipei because Taipei is a lot like New York City, and I don't want more of New York. I leave New York to see something new, to see something interesting, to see something different. Taipei wasn't different. It was the same in a different country, but it was basically the same kind of city. So that's why I didn't like Taipei. I loved Kaohsiung, and I love the South. So I go back to New York and I graduate from college. Then I go to work and I work for this big global company. And one of my colleagues in the company used to be a Mormon and he used to live in Taiwan because he was a Mormon trying to convert people. So we started talking a lot and we talked about Taiwan a lot. And I was like, I miss Taiwan. And you know what? I have to do an MBA because everyone's telling me, go do an MBA, come back, we'll pay you more money. So I said, okay, I'm going to do an MBA. Let's see, what school am I going to go to? I pick this school, National Sun Yat sen University. Why? Well, they gave me a scholarship, so it was totally free, and it was in a beautiful campus by the beach, by the mountains. It's a gorgeous place. So I go there, I study there, I meet my wife, and we get married. We travel the world. Then I graduate from there, and then I start looking for jobs in Taiwan because I'm living there. But the problem is they're all paying so little money. Sorry, they don't pay much in Taiwan. So if you want to work for a company in Taiwan, they want you to work 10, 12 hours a day and they pay you very little. The only place where you can make a decent living is teaching English. But the problem is, at the time, it's very hard for a guy like me in Taiwan to get a credit card, to buy a car, to buy a house. So I said, okay, I'm going to do all that stuff first, but I'm going to go to New York to do it. And then I'll probably come back to Taiwan when I have everything I need. So I go back to New York. I go back to my old job and I didn't like their offer. So I get another job working in one of the biggest hospitals in the country and the biggest hospital in New York City. I'm a manager over there. I'm like the boss. Money's good. I buy a condo. I buy a car. I have a baby son. Then we buy a house. I buy a bigger car. I got another baby girl. And then I'm like, it's time to go back to Taiwan because I miss Taiwan. Taiwan's great. And we got two little kids now, and we need some help. We need some mommy's daddy and mommy help. We need the grandparents to come and help us. So we go back to Taiwan, and this is our family, happy, lovely in Taiwan, and we'll see what happens next, guys. Now, what makes New York City and Kaohsiung very similar? I'll tell you what. Both New York City and Kaohsiung and Taiwan have tons of great food. All right. But in New York City, you don't have this. You don't have the fried food. You don't have night markets. You have sushi, but it's not the same. And it's really, really, really expensive. Food in New York City is way more expensive than in Taiwan, especially in Kaohsiung. Let's take something called the guabao, right? Your little pork sandwich. In Taiwan, it's about 50 NT. If you get it on the street in New York City, it's 200 NT. And if you can get it in a New York City restaurant where it's all looking fancy, they charge 500 NT and up for that little sandwich. Speaking of sandwiches, something that you can't get in Kaohsiung or Taiwan really is what I love about New York City, the pastrami sandwich. That's right, it's huge. You need two hands and a really big mouth to finish it. The other thing is New York cheesecake. I'm sorry guys, you have cheesecake in Taiwan, but it's nothing like New York cheesecake. New York cheesecake is just amazing. It's great. It's the best thing and I really miss it right now. We have something in New York called chopped cheese. We call it chopped cheese. It's not healthy. It's just really good sometimes when you're up late at night and you want to get a quick bite. And you usually get it at these places called delis or bodegas. We call them bodegas or we call them delis. And they're our version of 7-Eleven. You guys have 7-Eleven, Family Mart, OK Mart, High Life, whatever, all over the place. We do have 7-Eleven in New York City. It's popping up, but it's not as popular. And it's very different inside. So inside you get something like slushes, which is a frozen version of a soda. The food is not that good. It's old, stinky hot dogs and snacks. That's basically it. Not much else there. The place to go is always the deli. It's cheaper, it's better. They got fresh food inside. It just doesn't look really good from the outside. It looks really ugly. And just like Taiwan, we have delis across the street from other delis. Just like here, you have a 7-Eleven across the street from a Family Mart. It's all deli, 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 deli everywhere, just like in Taiwan. Another great part of New York City is the pizza. Pizza is the best in New York City. Nothing compares to the pizza in New York City. This this is a pizza in Italy. This is a pizza in Chicago. This is a Costco pizza, which kind of tastes like our school lunch pizza. Not really good. This is frozen pizza. This, this is not pizza. This makes me very angry. Taiwan doesn't have good pizza. This is pizza, the best pizza, and I really miss it, guys. All right, everybody, this is the final part of the presentation here. Now I'm going to talk to you guys about the good, the bad, and the ugly of New York City. So we talked a lot about the good already. Let's get into the bad and the ugly and some of the good between New York City and Kaohsiung. Bad part about New York City is the subway. The subway is dirty, dangerous, and damn slow. If you want to get on time, you got to leave your house 3 hours earlier. Okay, if you got to be at work at 8 o'clock, you should probably leave at 7, because there's no way that even if the ride takes 15 minutes, it's rarely going to take you 15 minutes. It'll probably take you 1 hour. Kaohsiung. Kaohsiung subway is beautiful. It's clean, it's safe, and it's always on time. Now, we do have some beautiful stations in New York City, just like the City Hall station, but there are 472 subway stations in New York City, and about 10 of them are nice. That's it. They're always fixing it. They're always working on the tracks, and that causes delays. That causes a lot of headaches for people. But at the same time, you got to understand that the New York subway system is 100 years old. It's more than 100 years old, actually. And that's why they're always fixing it. So when they fix one thing, another thing's broken, and they got to fix that. Just like the streets. The streets in New York City are horrendous sometimes. We have bad streets in New York City. We have these holes in the ground, and we call them potholes. Now, the potholes are a effect of the weather. Okay, New York City's weather is can be very cold, and it can be very warm and hot. It can be very humid. The weather is changing all the time. It's right by the water, and we have a lot of extreme weather. So the weather, when you have a road that freezes up and then it gets hot the next day, it can damage the road. So that's why the roads in New York City are always damaged and always under constant repair. Whenever there's a snowstorm, we have these big trucks that come out and they just sprinkle salt all over the road. The salt helps melt the snow so that people don't skid and people can get to work safely. But the salt damages the road and it also damages cars. So the roads, especially in the winter in New York City, can be really disgusting, nasty, and very difficult to navigate by. Kaohsiung's got really nice roads. Taiwan, Taipei, roads in Taiwan, you guys have beautiful roads. But what we both have in common is terrible traffic. New York City has horrible traffic. You could sit in your car in the same spot for an hour sometimes, especially during Christmas, and the traffic sometimes just doesn't move. I've had times where I'm sitting in traffic. It's so bad. It takes me maybe 20 minutes to pull over to the side of the road and I just take a nap and wait till it's over because I'm just like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'd rather just take a nap. I'll get home late tonight. I'll wait till 10 o'clock p.m. and then I'll go home. Or I see a restaurant over there. I'm going to go to that restaurant and I'm just going to relax over there until the traffic is done because I just can't do this. But not everybody has that flexibility. Some people have places to get to. They have to get home. They have to get to their family or they have to get to work. So the traffic can be really bad. I noticed that Taiwan has crazy traffic too. Pretty crazy. Imagine driving only instead of just all cars, you have scooters driving between the cars. So that makes it really frustrating. The traffic here can be bad, but I feel like especially in Kaohsiung, it's kind of easy to navigate through that traffic, especially if you have a scooter. The only problem is people on scooters do crazy things. That's what I've noticed in Taiwan. Sorry, guys. Um, the driving in Taiwan is insane and it's chaotic. It's crazy. It's messy. It's chaotic. But at the same time, it's organized somehow. It's organized and it's organized chaos. That's what it is. It's an organized, chaotic driving atmosphere. A difference between the US and New York City and Taiwan is that the pedestrian, the guy walking on the street, always has the right of way in New York. That means it doesn't mean if he's crossing when he shouldn't cross. If he's crossing that street, you stop your car and you let him cross. Period. In Kaohsiung, I've noticed that the faster car has the right of way. So if you're crossing the street, the car will just cut you off and just turn on you because, hey, I'm faster. I'll be done. I'll be gone. You don't have to worry about me anymore. So that's kind of the unspoken truth here. I know maybe that's not what's supposed to happen, but that's what happens. Um, the other thing, it's my pet peeve back in New York, back in the States. The left lane is for passing. We don't drive in that lane unless you're passing someone. Here, it's not so much the same. The left lane here is kind of for anyone, even slow drivers. So you kind of have a lot of slow pokes driving in the left lane all the time, which really grinds my gears, makes me really, really angry and frustrated. Because in New York, we drive fast. We have bad drivers in New York too, but we drive a lot faster. And the left lane is for passing. Left pass, left pass. That's what we always say. Don't drive in the left lane unless you're passing or you're going really fast. That's it. The left lane is for criminals, for people who want to go fast and break the law. And we all respect that. That's what we do. We have something in New York City and Manhattan called a Manhattan Henge. It's basically a solstice. And it's when you see the sun setting. It's a beautiful sight. And I recently learned that Kaohsiung has its own version of the Manhattan Hedge. So those are two similarities between the two cities that are great. But why do I love Kaohsiung? Well, Kaohsiung, it's got good weather. It can be really hot sometimes. It's got beautiful, beautiful, beautiful beaches. And I know you think your beaches are not that great. Trust me, in New York City, if we can go to the beach, we can only go to the beach maybe 2 months or a month and a half a year. I love the beach. I love boats. I love water. I love being by the water. I can't stand being in any city or country that's landlocked, surrounded by land, and not anywhere near the water at all. And finally, today I'm going to teach you guys some New York City slang. So the first word we're going to learn is forget about. We say this all the time. Forget about it pretty much means forget about it. It's like saying, never mind. I don't want to just talk about it anymore. Forget about it. Forget about it. But we also use it when we talk about something really awesome, really cool. Hey, did you see that new pizza place? Oh, forget about it. It's amazing. Forget about it. Or when we just don't want to talk about something, we'll just say, forget about it. Forget about it. Very popular in Brooklyn. Forget about it. Never mind. Forget about it. Next slang word is tight. All right. When you're tight, you're angry about something. Yo, why is that guy so tight? Why is he so tight? What's he all tight about? He's so tight today. Tight, you're angry about something. All right. Like something's tight. Okay. You're angry about something. That's what tight means in New York City slang. Another slang word, beef. When you have beef with someone, that means that you're angry at someone about something. It has nothing to do with meat or eating. Beef just means that you're angry. You have beef with someone else. That means that there's bad history between you and another person. So, oh, you two have beef? What do you have beef about, right? You guys are angry about something. And those are three slang words that you can learn today from New York City. There's tons of them out there. We can spend hours and hours of it. And one thing that I just have to close off saying is that no matter how much you learn about New York City, once you learn everything there is to know about New York City already changed. And then there's more things to learn about New York City. So it's basically impossible to learn and know every single street and corner and crack of New York City. It's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. And that's one of the greatest things about New York City. I highly recommend to you guys out there that if you can find this book, you read it. It's a great book about New York City, about all the cool stories and history of New York City. It's written by Pete Hamill. It's called Downtown, and it's a wonderful book about New York City, all the stories and the culture of New York City, and it's just a great, nice read. I want to thank you guys today for this video, for watching. You're going to see me around in school. If you have any questions, you can always ask me. And that's basically my journey from New York City to Kaohsiung. Right now, I'm in Kaohsiung. I love it. It's a great place. I still love many things about New York City, but I also love Kaohsiung. And yes, it's possible to love two cities at the same time. So it's a great city to be in, Kaohsiung. If you think it's a small city that nobody knows or recognizes, um, just know that that's a good thing. It's kind of a good to live in a place that's a untold secret, because sometimes too many people and too many things can destroy a city and make it not so special. That's why Taipei wasn't special for me. It's just more of the same. It's like Hong Kong or any other big city, um, and it's nice, but it wasn't for me. Kaohsiung is where I am right now. It's my second home right now. It's a beautiful city again. It's got everything here. Like in one day, you can go to the beach and the mountain. You can eat tons of cheap food. You can do so much in one day. One thing that you can't do in New York that you can do in Kaohsiung is in Kaohsiung, you can see and go to many places in one day. In New York, it's basically A to B to A, and that's it. But somehow in Taiwan, you can go from A to B to C to D to E to F, and then back to A all in one day, because it's a small country. So it's really easy to get around, and it's wonderful. All right, guys. See you later. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching.